Colossus is the most advanced lineup optimizer in daily fantasy sports. Lock and exclude players. Adjust player exposure to reduce risk of injury or poor performance. Customize individual projections or upload your own projections. Generate hundreds of optimal lineups in seconds. Name and save the best lineups. Create winning lineups for the top sites like DraftKings and FanDuel for free at dailyfantasycafe.com.
Hello and welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42 here talking about tonight's slate of action, and a lot going on here. We've got college football today, we've got NFL tomorrow, baseball, early slate about to get kicked off here in a little bit as well. So lots of sports to get acclimated with and get your research on. So I'll try to keep this one short and sweet for you here. Looking at starting pitchers, Madison Bumgarner, got to be your most popular play, I would imagine, here against the San Diego offense that has just been one of the worst in baseball over the past month or so. Bumgarner at $12,200 in this one. He's a decent-sized favorite at minus 180. 6.5 run total is the smallest on the night. So, and certainly bank on the fact that he's in a great spot here. And I'd imagine he'd be an even bigger favorite if it weren't for Ian Kennedy on the other side, who has pitched pretty well recently also. So looking over at him on the opposite side, more of a secondary cash game play for me. Not a guy with a ton of upside, but has had a couple big games over 30 points recently. So I think he's a viable secondary option or GPP option there. Other guys to look at here, Jose Fernandez making his return against Washington. Not a great matchup, but as we know, Jose Fernandez actually seemingly unbeatable at home. I mean, he is incredible at Marlins Stadium. So this is a guy that $11,700. You wonder if he's going to have any sort of pitch count. I don't imagine that he probably will. Also don't imagine he's going to go out there and throw 120 pitches. So he's a GPP option for me due to the tough matchup and the fact that he is just returning from the DL. Noah Syndergaard, another great spot for him at Atlanta. He's been up and down recently, but this is another guy who just has phenomenal numbers throughout the course of the season, almost 26% strikeout rate, swing strike rate over 11.5%. So this is another guy you can certainly consider, and he's a big-time favorite, minus 200 in an 8-run total here. So great spot for him. Other guys to look at, Lance McCullers, interesting one at $9,900 at the Angels. This is a guy who has only made 3 starts since he's returned from the DL, and he's been good in those 3 starts. I don't know that he's been $10,000 on the road good, but this is actually a park upgrade for him on the road at Angel Stadium rather than being at home at Minute Maid. So I think he's a fine option there as well. And then really the only other guy I'm looking at as far as tournaments go is Rainus Elias at $6,300. Hasn't been particularly great, was good in his last start, but facing a Colorado team who was terrible against lefties and terrible on the road. Yeah, it's in Safeco, one of the better pitchers parks in baseball, so I think that's a great spot for him if you're going to go cheap. Really nobody else that I'm going out of my way to target here. Catcher options, going to be hard for Kyle Schwarber not to be your top option. Coming off last night's 2 home run performance. In fact, 2 home runs in the first 2 innings in his first 2 at-bats. So big time upside for him. Probably not a guy you're going to be fitting into your cash games, but certainly a guy with massive upside. So target that there. Jared Eichhoff on the other side, who is hasn't been terrible since he's come up. He's been a serviceable pitcher, but been awful against lefties. 484 WOBA. So keep that in mind while you're making your lineups. More to come from these Chicago lefties. Travis d'Arnaud against Williams Perez. Williams Perez is a guy who has significant splits against lefties, is awful against left-handed batters, but obviously with d'Arnaud being a righty, this is a guy who isn't terrible against righties. 321 WOBA, but certainly very beatable still. D'Arnaud's been showing some big-time upside. So if you want to swerve off of Schwarber, I still much prefer Schwarber, but I think d'Arnaud's certainly a play there as well. Other guys, if Jonathan Lucroy's back in, he faces a lefty and Jeff Locke tonight who's not very good, so I like that. Another lefty here, Miguel Montero at $3,400 against Eichhoff, I think is in a great spot there as well. And then looking at some other guys, Wellington Castillo once again, homered last night, was one of the better plays last night. Again, been showing a ton of power. Now he gets Mike Bolsinger tonight at home. Bolsinger has actually been pretty good against right-handed batters, 253 WOBA allowed, but I do like the upside for beef here in this one. And outside of that, really nothing else that stands out at catcher. First base options, Anthony Rizzo, once again a lefty against Jared Eichhoff and the Cubbies in this big 9-run total here at Citizens Bank, so I think that's a great spot for him. Jose Abreu, Paul Goldschmidt, both those guys facing subpar pitchers. Goldschmidt, a tougher matchup against Bolsinger than Abreu is against Malone, but both guys certainly in play. Adrian Gonzalez, we're always talking about how Ruby De La Rosa has terrible splits against lefties. It's at 396 now, so equally terrible from what it was earlier in the season. In fact, it's been getting worse. So his price bumped up because of that at $4,600, and obviously nice park shift in Arizona tonight. So he's in a great spot. I'm still going to throw Miguel Cabrera into a couple tournament lineups like I wanted to last night before that game got rained out. So 4,500 for him is not a bad option. Mark Trumbo gets a lefty and Johan Fland, and that's a great spot for him. We know he mashes lefties. He's had a hell of a second half, so he's a guy that I'll be targeting in my tournaments. Lucas Duda, another lefty against Williams Perez, $4,200. He's in a great spot. A lot of good spots for these expensive first basemen, so those are the guys I'm looking at for the most part. I'm going to be spending at first base. Ryan Howard's another guy you can consider against Dan Herron, my favorite pitcher to pick on. And then one more cheap guy, Victor Martinez, is only $3,000. I know he's been terrible, but got to take notice once the price dips down this low. Second base options here. Got to look at Jose Altuve against Hector Santiago, the lefty. We know his track record of success against lefties there. Brian Dozier also gets a lefty. He has a lengthy track record of success. So those are going to be your chalk plays today. But obviously in tournaments, you want to swerve off these guys. A couple guys to mention. Chase Utley is at $3,400. Another lefty in that great spot against De La Rosa. I think he's in a fine option. Odubel Herrera is a guy who second base outfield, eligibility. Got some power, got some speed. Facing off against Dan Herron in that big total tonight. So he's in a great spot. Jose Ramirez has been hitting well for the Indians. He faces off against Justin Verlander today. Verlander has also been good, but at $2,800. Second base or shortstop, I don't think he's a bad punt either. Moving over to third base. I'm loving Miguel Sano against Jose Quintana. Quintana's a fine pitcher, but Sano has massive upside, especially in that park shift. Now at U.S. Cellular tonight. He's in a great spot. Nolan Arenado, a tournament option at $5,400 at Seattle. Obviously, Elias hasn't been great. Arenado's also been better against righties this season, but certainly a guy you need to consider with the sort of offensive output he's put out this year. Other guys, Kelly Johnson is a nice value play at $3,300 against Williams Perez. Mentioned targeting those lefties there. Sano's teammate, Trevor Plouffe, another guy that's on my list. And the final guy, another Cubs bat, but it's a righty this time. And Jared Eichhoff has been better against righties, much better against righties. Actually, at 210 Woba, but I'm looking at Chris Bryant as another option there. Shortstop, not a lot to see here. It's similar to what it was last night for me. Carlos Correa, Francisco Lindor. I'm paying up for one of those guys if I can. If not, I'm going down to a guy like Marwin Gonzalez. He's $2,900. He's, in a fine spot. Corey Seager at $3,400. Continues to hit the ball well when he's in the lineup. And, last night, all he had was a single and 4 walks, but he did it well. So he's obviously seeing the ball well, and he's a nice cheap option there at shortstop. Outfield options, Yoenis Cespedes is on fire. I mentioned he is a righty, yes, against Perez, who's much better against righties than lefties, but still a guy who's not very good against righties. Nelson Cruz, healthy, and he gets a lefty at home, and a bad one in Johan Fland, so definitely looking at Nelson Cruz there for some big-time upside. Ryan Braun gets a lefty. Park shift down low, 2 PNC from Miller Park, so maybe that'll keep some people off him. Hopefully it will, because I would love to play Ryan Braun here at some low ownership. Jeff Locke, not terrible against righties, 310 Woba, but definitely a guy that's absolutely beatable here in this spot. So moving on here to some other options. I'm looking at Andrew McCutchen against Kyle Davies. I think he's in a fine spot also. AJ Pollock continues to just hit everyone at 49. Mike Trout, his price up a little bit. Still hasn't had one of those breakout games recently. He did have a homer, 5 games ago? $4,800. He's still in play for tournaments for me at as he always is. But Lance McCullers has been a good but not great pitcher. Certainly a guy that I'm looking to target there. And then really any of these Houston righties that are in a lineup today, I'm looking at. There's not a whole lot of them in the outfield, but Carlos Gomez really stands out. Hector Santiago's allowed 20 home runs to right-handed batters this year, and Carlos Gomez just $3,800 tonight. He's a great option there. George Springer as well at 36. David Peralta, if you're still trying to look at games in the desert at Chase Field, I think he's a great spot at $3,900. Trace Thompson gets a lefty here. Tommy Malone, he's only 34. He's been hitting lefties incredibly well since he came up. So he's a great option. And then, of course, Gregory Polanco, as I always mention him, $3,600. Didn't do much last night, but I'm going right back to the well with him against a righty again tonight. And then cheap play of the night, if he's in the lineup, Justin Ruggiano. He's been great. He's been incredible, actually, since coming over to the Dodgers. So $2,500, he's my favorite punt of the night. That's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.